If you grew up in the UK like I did, then there's a big chance you've seen or at least heard of Horrid Henry. Based on the books by Francesca Simon, the cartoon show reigned British televisions in the late noughties and early 10s. As a kid, I remember watching it with blissful ignorance as I ate my cereal before I went to school. But in hindsight, is the show's title a fair representation of the main character? Let's delve into it. The old saying, nature versus nurture, is it in Henry's DNA to be horrid, or is it the way he was brought up? Because personally, I don't believe anyone can be born evil and want to cause harm to others. I believe it's their upbringing, what they've been exposed to, or perhaps it was some sort of trauma which has unfortunately evolved them into a bad person. So I don't believe Henry is horrible by nature, but instead he really does have the mean, awful parents he says he has. And here's why. When Henry is being horrid, they usually shout, yell, and order him to go to his room. And whilst harsh discipline can be useful sometimes, this is their main method to dealing with his behavioural problems. He's just neglected in his room, and sometimes they'll take some or all of his entertainment. Also, the main catchphrase his mother says is,
"Don't be horrid, Henry!"
and it's referred to so often, sometimes she can be heard saying it nonchalantly, as if she doesn't even care. This type of parenting is called a negative embedded command. This can encourage the person being told not to do something to actually do it, and this form of discipline is only used on Henry, never on Perfect Peter. And don't even get me started on that worm just yet, I'll get to him later. Another example of their terrible parenting is when it comes to a serious issue. They don't even help him find a solution. Two examples of this are when Henry eats all of the sweets in the cupboard to try and make his tooth fall out. When his mum finds out, she doesn't even check up on him or to see if his teeth are okay and still there. She simply just tells him no more sweets for a month. And the other example is when Henry's dad finds out he's failing at school. There's no conversation to try and figure out why he's underachieving. He simply just barks at him to do better next term. So let's say Henry is in fact the main cause for his behaviour. The parents aren't exactly trying to change it. I also theorised that Henry's parents don't like any of his friends. He's banned from visiting Rude Ralph, who is his best friend, along with many others at their homes. He's also never allowed sleepovers, yet in the episode Moody Margaret moves in, they are perfectly happy for her to take Henry's room, knowing full well that they are arch enemies. Henry even said that he would rather marry Miss Battleaxe than Margaret. They knew Margaret was an enemy of Henry's, yet they still treated her like royalty while she was there and let her boss people around. Now where do I even start with this smelly nappy baby? Perfect Peter is an absolute worm. He is far from perfect, by the way. Peter only shines in the shadow of Henry. He cares way more about getting Henry in trouble than how he is perceived himself. Every time Henry does something good, Peter is always there to try and ruin the situation. As long as Henry looks bad in front of mum and dad, then Peter's happy. I mean, just look at that face, it's sociopathic. And not to mention he's a snitch, by the way.
Look what Henry did!
And we all know what snitches get, and it's definitely not bit. But joking aside, as much as I despise Perfect Peter, it's not all his fault. Again, it goes back to the original point at the start of the video. Nature versus nurture. The parents are to blame for Peter being such an unlikable worm. They expect him to be perfect all the time. And whilst I don't want them to treat him like Henry either, sometimes it is good to be stern and frank with your children. Nurturing a boy to always be perfect is going to have detrimental effects on his future. He's going to end up with no friends because nobody wants to hang around with a goody two-shoes, and he's also going to be licking the boot of his future boss. With all of that factored in, do you still think Horrid Henry is true by name? Let me know what you think in the comments. Personally, I think Henry is a victim of abuse and neglect, and his family are to blame for his horrendous behaviour. That's all from me today, I hope you enjoyed, I'll see you next time.